Took a little trip from Austin down to Fredericksburg, down to the smallest park in Texas called Old Tunnel Park. And we got to stop at this really great restaurant called the Boil Shack in Henly, Texas. Great food, excellent service, and wonderful atmosphere. I highly recommend it. While Old Tunnel Park is known as the smallest state park in Texas, its real claim to fame is, of course, the tunnel that runs through it and the bats that hang out and emerge. And it was just spectacular. So there's great views from the top viewing platform, sort of across the hill country of Texas around Fredericksburg. Just really, really gorgeous. And it had recently rained, so it was looking really good. So lots of pretty trails. We walked around about a 0.75 miles, and we got there early enough to really enjoy it. Here's a map of the place. Here's what the actual tunnel looks like. A couple different views of it here, and this is where the bats hang out. They come out this end mostly for whatever reason, and this actually was built for a train track, and here's actually the track mound here. And the trail does have some wooden bridges to walk over, kind of picturesque and fun to walk across. And we did a little loop trail here as well. We walked the whole trail in, less than 45 minutes, so it actually worked out perfectly as the sun was starting to set. And I believe the bats kind of come out around 8 o'clock, but it varies. Here's another one of those nifty wooden bridges. Got to say, I really enjoyed a lot of the beautiful views from all around the park of the Texas Hill Country, and because it had just recently rained, it was extra beautiful as well. So here's the south end of the tunnel. This is where the bats emerge, and let's listen to the park ranger.
But they're heavy because bats' bones are solid. They're not hollow like most birds' bones are. So a bat has a difficult time just flapping their wings and getting up in the air. They prefer to be in an elevated position where they can drop down and get air underneath them. That's one of the reasons bats hang upside down, is to give them that ability to kind of get up and catch the air. So catching that wind is also helping them to get up to higher, like I said, foraging heights. So you might wonder, this is a tunnel, and it is open on the other end. So people often say, well, what happens if they all decide that they want to go north instead of south? And this time of year, in normal conditions, because we have about 3 million bats, oftentimes they will come out both sides because there's just so many. But the north end is quite a bit more overgrown than our side is. It's on private property, so they don't do as much habitat management as we do in terms of clearing away brush and shrubs in the front of the tunnel entrance. And so the bats have a harder time maneuvering through all that. And when they come out the other end, they have to fly up and over the hill. It's easier for them to get above our tree line than up and over the hill. So the majority of the bats, when they're here, usually always come out our side. Now again, the last 2 nights, because our population has increased, we have noticed some coming out of the north end. And you might see them, they'll fly in and then they kind of drop in with our group sometimes. So you might see some bats kind of darting in with ours, and those are the ones that are coming out the other side. So we'll kind of be on the lookout for that as well. Some things to keep in mind when the bats are flying out, we do have a big group down here. So remember that it's important to try to be as quiet as we can when the bats are flying around. The quieter we are, we might even have a random few bats that come and fly above our heads, which is pretty cool. You can up close and personal with them a little bit. You can take all the photos and video that you want, but we can't use any kind of lights, so no flash. If you're going to take a video with your cell phone camera, a really bright light comes on, please make sure you have that turned off as well, which usually if you turn off the flash, that takes care of that on your cell phone. And then the last thing is we can't come up to the fence at all when the bats are flying. That even means at the end, when there's just a few stragglers coming out, we don't want anyone to accidentally get bumped by a bat, so that's why we don't let anyone up at the fence. I've never seen that happen, but bats do sometimes end up on the ground right here because there's so many. Sometimes they bump into the fence, and so we just kind of want to make sure everybody's safe. So, also, please don't stand up and block anyone's entrance behind you. If you're in the very back, you're welcome to stand, or if you want to go back there and stand, we want to make sure everybody has a good view from where they're seated. So that's about it. Another really cool thing about being really quiet is if you think about all these bats are going to be beating their wings at the same time. We don't get to hear a lot of vocalizations. They don't make a lot of sound, but a sound that we do get to hear are all those wings fluttering together, and it sounds like falling water, which is really kind of cool. And they're going to give us some natural air conditioning because all those wings also produce quite a bit of wind. So a lot of cool things to look forward to. So just to give you a little history of the tunnel itself, it is a railroad tunnel. It's not a cave. I've already been referring to it as a tunnel. It was built in the 1900s, 1913 to be exact, is when the tunnel was complete, August 26, 1913. And it was part of a very short rail line that went from Fredericksburg to right outside of Comfort, and then met up with another railroad that went into San Antonio. So people hauled goods on it, even people. It was a passenger train as well, so people rode it. And it was in operation until 1941, but it was bankrupt by then. Hardly anyone was using it anymore because it was cheaper to use freight trucks, and we had road systems by then. So they decommissioned the railroad in 1941, and then in 1942, they came back, and along the whole route of this railroad, they pulled up everything. So if you're into railroad history, you can't really see a lot of it. The tunnel is really cool. And then if you guys hike down past our bridge along the trail, you're walking on the raised rail bed for a little ways, and you can see it on each side of the road, sometimes through the trees. And then if you really like railroads, if you continue on Old San Antonio Road towards Comfort, about 8 miles down, you'll see a county park. It's called James Kill Park. And if you look to the left in that direction, you can see the old railroad bridge that spans the Guadalupe River, which is kind of cool to look at as well. That was part of that other railroad that this one met up with. So that ended 1941. You know, it was a coal burning engine, so bats weren't hanging out in the tunnel with the train going through. But in the 50s, we do know that's when bats started arriving here. Some farmers and ranchers who lived down the road were out one evening and saw smoke coming from this direction, and they thought a fire had started over here. But when they came to investigate, it wasn't fire or smoke, it was a whole lot of bats. And they have been coming back every year since the early 50s. And our population fluctuates just like any other animal population in terms of food availability and drought and things like that. How many of you have never seen bats come out of a cave or any bridge? Only a few people. So most of you have seen them before. That's really awesome. If you're from Central Texas, you probably have seen bats flying around. It's estimated that during the summer months that we have about 100 million Mexican free-tailed bats that migrate into Texas from Mexico. So there are a whole lot of just that one species hanging out with us here in Central Texas. We have this great karst topography where there's a lot of really cool places where there's caves that bats like to hang out in. But also TxDOT is building highway bridges with these expansion joints. Bats really like to hang out in those expansion joints. And when TxDOT discovered how important bats are to agriculture, they've continued to use those types of expansion joints. So there are a lot of highway bridges that bats are roosting under as well. If any of you are from Austin area, you know about Congress Street Bridge. Round Rock, McNeil Bridge has another pretty large colony, and even in San Antonio there's quite a few highway bridges that have bats under them. So a lot of really neat places to go and watch bats. The largest bat cave in the world though is located right outside of San Antonio. This is what their emergence looks like. They have 20 million Mexican free-tailed bats. It's called Bracken Cave. Bracken Cave is owned by Bats Conservation International, which is a nonprofit that does great work for bats all around the world. And they do have member nights. If you donate to their organization, you can sign up for some of those. I mean, it's a spectacular thing to see, 20 million bats. You can imagine how thick it might be when they're coming out. if you wanted to stay there to watch all of them emerge, you'd have to sit there for about 3 to 4 hours. So our emergence is short and sweet. You get to see, still get to see a whole lot of bats. So, so again, a lot of cool places to go and watch bats. And we're happy that we have the bats here because of what they eat, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But this is what they look like up close. Here in Central Texas, we have about 8 fairly common species. Texas happens to be the battiest state of the United States of America. We have the greatest diversity of species out of any state. The United States has 47 bat species, and here in Texas we have 32 of the 47.
Wow.
So the greatest diversity of those bat species, though, is found out in West Texas. My favorite part of Texas is Big Bend area, and there's 21 species that hang out there. It's my favorite place to go to work on bat research and conservation efforts. But here at Old Tunnel, we do also have, along with our Mexican freetails, we have about 3,000 of this bat, the cave myotis bat. These two bat species, you'll often hear about them roosting together in the same place. So they share the tunnel as a roost site, but they do not roost mixed in with one another. They have separate roosting areas. They also don't come out at the same time. So the freetails come out and they do this really cool formation and get above the tree line. When the myotis come out, they fly really close to the ground and then they head out straight through the trees. And they usually don't come out till way after it gets really too dark for us to see. So we won't get to see the myotis flying. And if you'll notice, this is what the myotis looks like when they're flying. They have this kind of short, broad-shaped wingspan. And because of that wingspan, it's shorter, they can maneuver through trees and bushes easier because of that shorter wingspan. They don't need to get above the tree line when they leave, and so that's why it's easier for them to go fly really low when they leave. Now, both of these bat species are considered to be medium-sized bats. I told you before, are you seeing bats?
Yep.
Awesome, that's totally cool. Coming out at 8 o'clock, that's nice.
8 o'clock
So,
is it?
I'm going to stop talking, and after they're done, I can finish, or you can ask me questions if you want. But please remember to stay seated, stay quiet, and no flash photography, and we should have a good show.
They're pretty small, huh? Yeah, they are. Oh, it's gonna flap. They almost look like big frogs. Oh, they do, yeah, you're right. Like, I would be scared if that was an insect. Speaking of insects, Mr. Fly, you should get out of here before we get eaten.
So I really enjoyed that little talk, kind of put the whole bat emergence into perspective. So here they come. I'm just going to be quiet here and allow you to observe what we got to observe as the bats emerge for approximately 17 minutes.
Up and over the trees. The building. I really have small things. Or do you think that's them too? I don't know. Yeah, they are. You guys can tell. honestly. Looks like a bunch of locusts. Just like go back and cave. I don't think so. I think it would like slow them down, but I think it was cool.
So if you guys look towards the east that way, there are some coming out the other There's some coming out that way.
Oh, I see. Yeah, right there. Yeah, they do look kind of purple. They were kind of purplish bats. At least when they're fast. Wow. It's crazy. I think they do a little bit. I think the flies was flying over here. The bat's like, hey.
Definitely feel the wind.
Yeah. Very, very slight wind, I feel it. Wow. That's amazing. Almost like watching water going down the river. We're at the river. Wow. Yeah. Really wanted to shake the bat. That's the distance. Up there, can you see him?
Mm-hmm.
On the phone, I mean. That's these cicadas. Probably used to have their big cicadas. They're almost, Fredericksburg cicadas are almost big as that. This must be all over by some bats coming off. Just joking. Like that's over my energy. You know, I can't really see them. I mean, I can, but like, they almost look like spots in my vision, you know what I mean? Like little,